May I allow 20 seconds to answer the last question? When you do salpingectomy in salpings that are full of fluid, you are many times obliterate some of the blood vessels that go directly through the meso to the ovary. Not every time. So you better up opening the tube and just taking partial tubectomy and not all of it. And then you might not be losing because you lose the blood vessel. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I would go on, continuing this idea of poor responders. And I'd like to say that we have to be keen with one another after 40 years of trials that, in my view, we didn't do much of a progress. I think we're stuck in the same place. All of you know that with age, we lose many of our follicles, and there are only few follicles in older age. So you have this drop in number of follicles, and you have this increase in number of bad follicles. So when you cross a certain line at 40 years of age, you have few follicles and almost 90% or 100% of bad follicles. But there is a difference that we have to pay attention to. If we look here, at the age of 25, the spread between the worst cases and the best cases is 100-folds. This one might have 10,000 follicles altogether in the ovaries, and this one might have close to 1 million. So when you get to 35, some of them has 1,000 follicles in the ovaries, and other might have 100 times more. So all in all, there is a big spread between women, and that's exactly what we're seeing in the clinic. We are just identifying the spread. We are not making any progress in changing the fate. On top of all this, there is the environmental part, and I would not dwell on that, but everyone understands that environmental condition can tamper with sperm and egg and with our life, actually. But if you take it to a single patient, you see that a mean at the age of 35 here, you can see that some of them have the mean for the group is 500 follicles per month that she can sacrifice, and actually she's sacrificing, and they are spread out through the month. So every day you might have few follicles coming up. With a mean of 500, it's enough for stimulation. But some of them have several thousand at this age, and some of them have 10, 20, 30 for the whole month. So in the window of opportunity, there would be 1, 2, 3, 5 follicles at the one patient, and in the other, she might have 20, 30 follicles in the same age. So age is not everything. What's everything is the number of follicles that this patient has. So obviously, if you have 1 month with few follicles and 1 month and another patient with many follicles in the same month, you would get all this. Those with low number of oocytes, you get in stimulation, low number of oocytes, low quality, high cancellation rate, low success rate. If you look overall to the group, then you see that the incidence depends on the definition. And for years and years, we plugged with many definitions of what is low responders. The only resource that the patient has is actually the month that she has. The number of follicles is given. Now, if you're going to use every month properly, maybe you can get to a better result. So the incidence, we put it years back to 9 to 24, others put it 5 to 35. Any way you look at it, it's increasing quickly and doubling with every 2 years that lapse after 38. So all the new studies are actually not comparable because the definition was much different. And the definition that is put up a few years ago by the Bologna meeting or Bologna criteria doesn't help in deciding what to do. It's only helpful in defining the situation and compare studies. So future study that will use this criteria will allow us to compare between them, because we cannot compare many of the studies that we've done before. But they are not helpful. This criteria cannot serve you as exclusion from treatment. So I would exclude any patient based on AMH of any level or FSH. The FSH, it depends. FSH, and we will see it further. So the common risk factors are known to everybody: obesity, smoking, previous ovarian surgery, tubal, everything goes. What happened in a patient who comes first time with poor ovarian reserve? Does she going to have poor ovarian reserve second time? The answer, no. 38% of them will respond better, which means that you tuned up in the second time your stimulation. But you cannot go like this forever, because if 2 times, the second time you tune your stimulation, maybe you increase the dose and so on. If twice she's poor responder, she's probably going to be poor responder. This is an interesting slide that shows you the results of treatment according to the first stimulation. So if the first stimulation was bad or it was good, you see that the next stimulation is close in number of oocytes to the first stimulation, and then the results will go up and will taper down by 11 and 15 follicles. So as we know already, we don't need many follicles, but we need follicles. If you have less, you are poor. If you have more, you're better. And these are all the reserve tests known to everybody here in the room. And what is the utility of these ovarian reserve tests? We must say that the utility of ovarian reserve tests in predicting individual response is far from perfect. The relationship between test results and true ovarian reserve is unknown, but is probably low for qualitative aspect and moderate for quantitative aspect. ORT provide indirect measurement of the recruitable follicle present in the FSH window at the beginning of each cycle. The true ovarian reserve test is dynamic test or response to stimulation. So we are exposing them to stimulation, and then this is the biological test that tells us if they're good or bad. Marker can identify poor ovarian reserve only when it is started. So this is too late. You cannot tell a patient, you are going to be poor ovarian reserve, let's freeze your eggs or anything, which is a different concept altogether. But again, this test, you cannot, if these tests are positive, then she is already poor ovarian reserve. Decide what you want to do, but count on that. Markers cannot guide the risk of early aging or need for fertility preservation and have 10 to 20% false positivity. From the other end, we found that low response to ovarian stimulation can herald ovarian insufficiency. So the conclusion of this part, response to stimulation is true ovarian reserve. Now, at FSH is an important trick. If FSH is normal, then the patient is good responder at all ages, even at 42. But if FSH is bad and she's young, she can still respond. So FSH is one thing, but the age is another thing. So poor ovarian reserve at earlier age, we do understand that they have a better chance because the quality of the eggs is better at lower age. She's not exposed either to environmental or to other things. So early age with poor ovarian reserve markers, she's still good. But at older age, if she has high FSH and so on, results are very bad. So what are the treatments that we have? Actually, to reverse the quality and the quantity of egg with better stimulation remain a great challenge that was not reached yet in my view. Unless we come up with stem cells that change the rules of the game, we cannot do much to change it. However, treatment can slightly modify the number of eggs collected by widening the window of pickup. So with that, you can use any stimulation that you know. If you can widen the window and have follicles of 13, 14 together with 21, 22 or more, that can work. So if you look at meta-analysis of the literature, you find the conclusion that all the reviews and meta-analysis agree that there is insufficient evidence for the benefit of almost all particular intervention to improve treatment outcome in poor ovarian reserve. In my view, cycle-to-cycle variability might be more important than the stimulation protocol. Variability of antral follicular count at the recruitment was seen in other studies. Ovarian reserve test at the window when FSH is started in the first days will provide indirect measurement of recruitable cohort in that specific window. This variability might have influenced also results of studies in the past. We looked at variability between patients because 1 month can be 1, 2 follicles, next month she can be 3, 5 follicles. So the conclusion, in my view, variability and carefully selected cycle, or just luck, you stumbled on a good cycle, might be more important than the protocol itself. Which are the protocols? Actually, like the number of audience that are in the hall, I heard of protocols. There are every kind of protocols. But let me have some comments on few of these protocols. Normal cycle is something that is tried, and those who have 1, 2 follicles, you better go on 1 follicle that cycle if she doesn't have more than that. So these are really the bad cases that we have. Clomid, in my view, Clomid is interesting. It started in Australia, Clomid plus FSH. Clomid itself have a sort of osmotic things that influence the follicles to grow to 25, 26, 27, 28. Many of you have seen cases of Clomid treatment that the follicle went to 26, 28, and it was still good, mature oocyte. So it opened up the window of opportunity. You can go with the bigger one up till there, and wait for the second or third or fourth to get to 15, 14, and so on. So it's not a bad choice to go Clomid plus FSH, and obviously it's much cheaper. Then you have all the protocols. I would not go and dwell on them. Luteal FSH, Elonva, successive stimulation with freezing or flexible. Successive stimulation or 2 stimulation the same cycle, what's called Shanghai or others. In my view, it's only playing on the variability of the same month or that month, because those 20 follicles that she spread out through the months are not spread equally. This is biology, it's not mathematics. So you might stumble. Now I have 3 follicles, and in the luteal phase, I didn't transfer, I frozen. I go on and I can find another 3. So now it was 2 and then it's 4. It's not a panacea, it's just playing on the variability. You might be stumbling in the next month on the same variability. So this is for you to decide. High dose of FSH. All of the treatment use high dose. Let's decide what is high dose. In my view, anything over 300 or 375 is a waste of time and money, because the receptors, the follicle, everything can respond to high dose. But if you give extreme dose, like others tried, 600 or more, this is a waste of money, a waste of time. 375, remember, is the variability in the patient and not the variability in your drug. So you're playing with 2 variants and you'll get different results each time. I don't want to go into this, that we reported that flow oocyte quality, we think that high dose might be even against the interest of the patient. What is the optimal maximal dose? There are studies that tried 300, 450, 600 units, and they didn't see any difference. So why give 600 if you can go by with 300 or 375? I personally, these days, never go above 375. And this is a study that showed that mild stimulation strategy in women with poor ovarian reserve undergoing IVF, a multicentric study, very recent, and what they show is that there is no difference, actually. You go mild stimulation or high stimulation, the difference is not high. So I would go the lowest stimulation that these patients respond. Natural cycle, there are some studies that try to say that natural cycle makes a difference. Let me expose to you that we had this experience that natural cycle would never give you more than 5% pregnancy rate. If you get more than 5% pregnancy rate, it means you are selecting the denominator. You are either counting for only mature oocyte or mature pregnancy or embryos or whatever. But if you go per follicle, it's only 5%. If you have more than 5%, check the way you're reporting your results. What about testosterone, DHEA? I think the jury is still out on both of them. You read the literature, you find here a meta-analysis and another meta-analysis. But there are studies that say yes, some studies say no. Remember that most of the study that gets negative are underreported. Those who are positive are reported more. So we have a tendency to, but you can try it. It's the art of medicine, but it doesn't mean that it works. And what about growth hormone? Our own experience, we didn't show it works. There is a meta-analysis on 169 cases that shows it works. It doesn't matter. You can pick the dose, 4 units, 1 unit per kilo, whatever you, 0.1 unit per kilo, whatever you decide is the dose. But in my view, in our experience, it didn't work. The literature shows you that it is one way to go. with the game between the doctors and the patient, sometimes it gets into action that you have to use something else. But if you ask scientifically, no proof on that. And this is also interesting. Pre-treatment with luteal phase estrogen, some people give pills, some people give estrogen. If you look at this study, it shows an effect. But if you look at it carefully, there is only one study that shows real effect, while all the rest shows no effect. So, if you do 20 studies, there is always one study that will show an effect, because this is 0.5 statistic. The statistic tells you that 0.5 of cases are by chance. So between 20 studies, if one is good, doesn't mean anything in my view. What about accumulation and freezing of the oocyte? So the group of Ivy with Cobo have done this experiment. They took 2 cycles from each patient and frozen, so together 594 cycles. And then others were fertilized and transferred. And they show a huge difference, 15% compared to 7%. So immediately it comes to your brain, okay, let's freeze and do again. But you ask yourself, where's the logic behind this? I'm using 2 cycles against 1 cycle of more patient. And in fact, the dropout in the group that did the fresh one was huge. And the ET cancellation in the group that did the fresh one was very big, as much as your experience with this patient. Because when you go for stimulation in bad cases, you have dropout and you have everything. So it is, in my view, like comparing 2 cycles to 1 cycle. So there is no real message. You can do that just to play on the variability that we just discussed, the Shanghai idea and so on. So this is within the art of medicine. You do it, no real proof, but it's between you and the patient. But you have to know what you're doing. In my view, this is the most important slide, and this is the only message that I can bring to you after 40 years of studying this issue. And I've been giving this lecture on poor responders ever since, I think, 30 years ago or more. So this is a very recent study, 2014, and it took randomization of 50 couples above 40 years of age. Each one of them got 2 cycles, either 2 cycles of Clomid and IUI, 2 cycles of FSH and IUI, and 2 cycles of IVF. So imagine these results are for 2 cycles, not 1 cycle. And what it shows that if you go on IVF, you have a much higher success rate than if you go with Clomid or with FSH. Almost 3 times, 3 times the success, or 2 times the success. So my conclusion, my take of this, is the time is the main resource of the patient. So if you don't want to waste your patient time, just take her directly to IVF. If she's over 38, 39, take her directly to IVF. The HMO in our country accepted it. In the past, they asked us to do 2 cycles of stimulation, IUI, before they pay for the treatment. Today, no. If a patient is equal 39 or more, she can go directly to IVF, because IVF provides you the best results per month. And month is the only resource that this patient has. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, heterogeneous of the groups prevents good comparison, because more uniform definition is an obstacle to recruit enough patients in a single center. You cannot get really uniform. Patients are different. Very high dose of FSH are probably ineffective and are not needed, no more than 375. Natural cycle, transdermal testosterone, growth hormone, and maybe DHEAS should be further studied for merits. So we don't condemn them, but we say there is not enough data to show. Variability might be more important than stimulation protocol. Early follicular phase, follicular count, and FSH can help in picking the best cycle for stimulation. IVF should be the first choice in patients over 39 because time is everything. Thank you very much.